The people I coach, a lot of them are suffering because they bought the idea that even though they want a loving, committed relationship, having a no-love, no-commitment sex partner would be a good way to fill the time. And I was conditioned to believe this too. You know, maybe I should have a friends with benefit arrangement, and then magically the real guy for me will come along, and I can ditch the first one and then hop over to the second one. But has that ever worked for you? No. Friends with benefits, they're not really friends, and you really got to ask yourself if there's a benefit. Because first of all, no healthy person is looking around the horizon and saying, you know what I need? I need someone who right now is using some other person for sexual recreation. That's not what they do. Second of all, if you have attachment wounds from emotional neglect in your childhood, you're kidding yourself that you can do anything like this casually. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Maggie, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I don't know how or where to begin, so I'll just jump right in. About a year ago, I started this sort of friends with benefits relationship with a coworker of mine. I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things that I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's just read through Maggie's letter and see what's going on." She says, "We were good acquaintances, and we clicked very well. It was very obvious from the start that there was some attraction between us, but I brushed it off for the longest time until it got really uncomfortable, so we sat and talked it out. Sitting him down to talk was not easy. After weeks of acting all sorts of awkward around me, ignoring me at work, but texting me nonstop when we were back home, catching him staring at me, of course he'd break eye contact as soon as I looked in his direction, I decided I've had enough and that I needed to confront him. So I did. He tried to avoid this, but I managed to sit him down eventually and talk to him." It's the third time it's an emphasis on how she made it happen. Okay. "This was when he told me about his last heartbreak and how bad it affected him and how he's still hung up on his ex and how even though he can't deny the attraction between us, he is not fit for a relationship. He stated that he just needed someone to stand by him and support him. I wasn't convinced. So I urged him. And that's when he admitted being interested in only a physical relationship. I didn't entirely accept the idea, but I did not reject his offer either. I told him I'm willing to take our acquaintance further and become good friends, but I'm not entirely sure about anything else and that I'll need to think about it more. Mind you, this came right after I turned 25 and had made the decision to be less uptight and more, quote, reckless, so to speak. Despite my age, I've only been in one relationship, and no, this didn't come from me feeling like I'm missing out. It's just that I've been really strict with myself when it comes to relationships and never gave anyone a chance. So I wanted to take this opportunity to experience more and have some fun. I grew up as a very sheltered child with overbearing and overprotective parents, a father who expected nothing but perfection, and a mother with a passive personality. Her presence was always overshadowed by his. I was the good kid at school who not only never skipped class, but the mere thought of doing such a thing brought so much fear and anxiety I never dared to do it. I used to copy my eldest sister a lot, and my mother saw this, but never tried to fix it. Maybe she thought it was convenient in making me behave and persuading me to change my opinions about things, since she and my eldest sister got along so well. This continued, she calls it the persuasion, but I don't really understand what the persuasion was. I guess trying to get you to act like your sister, I guess, until I was well in high school, even though I by then was overcopying my sister and everything. Okay, like no identity or something? I've mostly worked it out, but I still hold a little bit of resentment toward my mother because of this. And I still suffer and muscle through many insecurities, okay? I grew up into the type of person who cannot handle uncertainty or gray areas. I could not make mistakes and everything had to follow a system. I dismissed every thought of relationship because I was under the impression that whoever I pick has to be it. That was until I got into university and struggled so much with my self-image and my identity and my beliefs. I worked extra hard on myself, read books, watched online videos, and practiced mindfulness. And by the time I graduated, I was a completely different person. That was when I decided to give life a shot. try new things, have some reckless fun, and get into relationships. So here I was, a year after graduation, with one ex to my name and a possibility of some fun and experience to be had. And only a week after I confronted my coworker and he made his offer, we found ourselves out on a date. Found, okay. Or at least that's one way to call it. We sat down and laid all of our cards out on the table, I guess, and I conveyed to him that this is my first time ever getting involved in such a thing. He was nice and respectful. We went on for a couple of months until one day he started acting weird. He'd never initiate anything, and whenever I flirted, he'd either change the subject or dismiss it jokingly. I didn't know how to act, but if there was one thing I knew is how he hated confrontation. So I decided to test the waters and jokingly brought up the subject of ending things between us, and he didn't budge. And just like that, our relationship was brought to an end. I was so hurt, I can't remember the last time I cried that hard. But lo and behold, here we are a couple of months later, going at it again and messing around again. What happened was he simply reached out after a while and expressed his intentions of wanting to carry on where we left off. I refused at first, but then I yielded. I made sure he understood how much I was hurt by his actions and that he can't do that again. He apologized, and we got involved again. Only he did the same thing again, and he went cold on me, but this time I wasn't surprised. I proceeded to act as if nothing had happened. And again, he was back, and again I refused to take him in, but eventually yielded like the clown I am. All this took place over about a year or so, though through which I was struggling with the hardest emotional battles I've ever been through. From feeling like the sexiest person ever to feeling like a slut, struggling with jealousy over mutual friends we had, and seeing how close he got to them, while with each time I took him in, we managed to only drift further apart. I was so hung up on him, I didn't want to lose him for some reason. But I've had enough. I decided that my attachment to him was unreasonable and that I should put a limit to this. I was pouring too much into someone who only gave back too little. And I was afraid of losing someone who was not afraid of losing me. I considered him as a friend, and despite everything, I could not bring myself to hate him. But apparently, he didn't care, or even if he did, he's in too deep in whatever it is he's going through to realize anything. Either way, I deserved better. I suspended all of our activities and gave him no explanation whatsoever. Continued to treat him as normal, and he seems to have gotten the hint. As I mentioned before, we have friends in common, one of which is a very dear friend of mine, but she's also really close with him. We kept this whole thing a secret from her, and I intend to keep it going the same. My plan is to slowly drift away and hopefully just keep in touch with her alone. My only worry is that I'm scared I'll yield again, because even though I made my mind up, it still hurts letting him go. He's a wounded soul who lost his father at an early age and was forced to grow up quickly and take on the burden of providing for his family. But deep down, he's still a child. And it's very evident in how he handles his emotions. My heart goes out to him, but I know we can't continue like this. He's not the only one at fault here. After all, I was the one who allowed this cycle to continue by saying yes each and every time, even though I knew he was too flaky and messed up. If he ever confronts me, I'm down to sit him down and let him know about this decision I made. But until then, I'll continue acting like it's nothing until I eventually drift off and eliminate him completely from my life. I'm hoping my story made sense, and I hope you can give me some feedback on whether or not I handled this situation correctly. All right. Thank you, Maggie. I hear you, and yes, I think I can help. It was about a year ago, you got into the friends with benefit relationship with a coworker. So I just would like to say, if it still needs to be said, like getting involved with coworkers is super risky. And because getting attached to them, having a relationship with them that's secret from other people, like all of that starts bringing up so much dodgy stuff that can compromise your career. I just would say, if you can possibly help it, don't have relationships with coworkers unless you really think true love has come to town. And that would be, it's mutual, you've had a chance to talk about it, you're prepared to, it would be worth losing your job to perpetuate the relationship. Actually, when you have complex PTSD like we do, it can seem like it's worth losing your job for the littlest thing because our need for that love is so great. So, a lot of stuff we do that's a bit wonky and we lose our bearings, it's just because we needed to be loved, we were lonely, and, we started thinking in a fuzzy way just to take the little that was available, even though it wasn't really what we wanted. And I think that's what happened here with you. So what I thought was interesting is that you felt there was flirtation and attraction, but he did not try to initiate a relationship with you. You tell me 3 times that you confronted him. Like, that's a really strong word. I confronted him about it rather than, I don't know, that's a very aggressive word. And so, it just sounds like you really sought out this relationship. You wanted it. And I've just learned that some people, and especially men, will, if you push them enough, they'll have sex with you, right? And so that's kind of what it sounded like to me. I didn't hear like a great deal of interest. He told you flat out the sort of gentleman's version of I'm not into you, but that's what it was. So he told you he's still hung up on his ex, he's heartbroken, and there's an attraction, but he's not fit for a relationship. That was very honest and pure. Like, that happens. People get attracted to each other, but they acknowledge where they are. But I tend to think that may have been true that he was there, but sometimes that is the kind person's version of just saying, I just don't feel that way about you. But some people, they'll have a sexual relationship with you if it's there to be had. And, so that's what happened. So then he said he just needed someone to stand by him and support him. So that's kind of poignant, actually. So that suggests maybe he was going through something. He just needed somebody to stand by him and support him. Have you ever been in that situation where you were having hardship and somebody was just trying to get into a relationship with you? It's kind of, okay, I'm going to be hard on you here, Maggie. It's a little bit selfish. If that's what he was saying, he didn't need a relationship. He wasn't ready. It wasn't right for him. He just needed someone to stand by him and support him. And you said, I wasn't convinced. So that Maya Angelou thing, if somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. He wasn't being abusive or anything. He was just like, I can't do that right now. I wasn't convinced. Okay, that's what we do. That's a flip. It's a limerent flip is what I call it. I think you might have a little bit of limerence going on here. I don't know if it's the gravest case I've ever heard, but it's where somebody says, look, I'm not interested in you. So at first you get all sad, and then your mind kind of turns things around and goes, no, actually, what they really mean is that they are interested. And so sometimes we really just have to accept a no as a no. No means no in this context as well. But you urged him, and that's when he admitted being interested only in a physical relationship. Okay, so there's where you did the second flip, is where you that's not what you wanted, but you decided to make it what you would do anyway. And I hear this long rationale, and I get it. You've been very rigid, and you feel like you haven't gotten out of the box much in your life, and I get it. That's reasonable, and you wanted an adventure. So, okay, let's look at the bright side. You had your adventure and you got your experience with how that feels. That for you, a friends with benefit relationship is not a friend and it doesn't benefit you. It just gave you the unhappiest year of your life. Because it's not true. You know what it is? It's really dishonest. I know of very few situations, friends with benefits. I think it's possible for some people, but if you have an attachment wound, even if you don't like them, it's pretty hard to, not attached to them because of sex. But also, you're in love with him. That's what's going on here. You're in love with him. So you didn't accept the idea. You didn't entirely accept the idea, but you didn't reject his offer. And you said you wanted to take the acquaintance further. But I would just say, when you have feelings for someone and they say they don't have feelings for you, I just suggest don't take the acquaintance further. Don't do that. That's wishful thinking that you can get your needs met, by kind of, what have I called it before? Stealing from 7-Eleven. When I was a kid, sometimes we didn't have money and we were kind of hungry and we wanted a treat. And not only were my parents very poor and hippies, they wouldn't let us have sugar. So I was obsessed with getting sugar. And so with some friends once, we got interested in discovering, you can steal candy from 7-Eleven. And then you have to go hide out in the alley and eat your candy. And it's not, it's not as good. It's not as good. And that's this is what I mean when it's like, oh, I can have these certain aspects of a relationship, that there's sex, there's a man's body there, he's sitting next to you. Maybe he spends a little time with you. It sounds like he just didn't want to. He never instigated. I mean, there were so many ways it let you down and hurt you. And instead of going, oh gosh, I really had a better relationship than this in mind, and leaving, you did the trauma thing that we do, and you crap fitted. You just changed yourself to accommodate the limitation of the relationship that made you so unhappy. And you tried to convince yourself to stop being so unhappy. And I'm just inviting you, just like pay attention to how it feels when you do that. We've all done it. You're 25, and hopefully this will help you to not do that again. Well, you're probably going to do it again in some little way. Like, seriously, everybody does this sometimes. We just get wishful thinking, and we fit ourselves to something and just think, maybe I'm really being too demanding. Maybe I'm being too old-fashioned. Maybe I'm being too rigid. Maybe I need an adventure. You kind of talk yourself into it. It's interesting what you said. I don't totally see the connection between what's happening, but it's always connected, right? So I'm not really going to comment on that. I just think whatever happened when you were a kid, I'm just seeing this now, but you worked extra hard on yourself in college, your identity, your image, your beliefs. You read books, watched videos, practiced mindfulness, and then you graduated, you were a completely different person. And I just wanted to suggest that nobody's ever a completely different person, and that's an interesting, possibly perfectionistic interpretation. Finally, I stopped being me. It's not really a big deal, but I just find it interesting, and I kind of want to open that up and poke around in there a little bit and go, is it really best to become a completely different person? And does that mean that who you really are, your baseline, basic self, is unacceptable? Because that's the thinking that leads us to crap fit, right? That's the thinking that goes, I feel so jealous, I'm miserable, he never calls, I have to do everything. This isn't what I wanted. Oh, and I lost my boundaries again. I said no, and now I'm back. You felt terrible. And is that not kind of similar, where you just you wanted to be somebody different? I'll just be somebody who doesn't care. And boy, have I done that before. And thankfully, I never became somebody who doesn't care. I can't stop caring. I'm very tenderhearted. Casual stuff is not for me. I never did well with that. And it made me cry too. I get it. So you decided to give life a shot. So here's where I want to show you something. Trauma people do black and white thinking, and I think this is black and white thinking. Either I only have one relationship and act perfectionist and never get into anything, or I get into a friends with benefits thing. But I just wanted to point out this huge middle ground where you date people who you are sincerely interested in and who are interested in you, and it may not work out. We often have to date several people to find someone that we would like to settle down with, right? And it can be a pleasure. It doesn't have to be so terrible. Although it usually is if you have what I have. If it doesn't work out, it's just a tragedy, but I'm laughing at myself, not you. But it's normal to just, to date around a little bit, and then it doesn't have to be so serious. They don't have to be the one yet. If what you want is to, find the one and have that be your monogamous, committed relationship, marriage, then what I suggest to you is to get very clear about what the criteria are. And I would guarantee what's not going to be on that list is ambivalence about whether they're emotionally available and are into you and want to be with you. Because your coworker wasn't even ambivalent. He was like, no, that's not what it is. It's so painful. It's like, I feel pain on your behalf. It's just so painful. And the trouble is, it's just, that's how we are, we attach, and sex really accelerates that. So one thing you can do to get to know people better and see if it makes sense to be attached to them is to just slow the whole thing down. I know it's normal, especially if you're 25, a lot of people go very fast or they have hookups. But, maybe as a person who has difficulty in this area, you do it your own way. And the beautiful thing about when you define your own boundaries about that, your own standards, is the people who are interested in you are people who have matching boundaries and standards. Yes, there will be people who go, I don't have time for you. I'm not going to wait 3 months to sleep with you. And that's a lot what everybody's fear is. I'll never find anybody. But what you will find when you do find somebody is somebody who who thinks that's cool, who wants it for themselves, who respects it. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I just, like, everybody laments how casual things have gotten. And if you don't like it, like, you know, do the other thing. Many people do. When I was a teenager in high school, I used to do drugs. I wasn't like a huge druggie, but I used to do drugs, and I really didn't understand that it was a big deal. I thought everybody did drugs. I did, because everybody I knew did drugs. And compared to them, I barely did any drugs. And then, you know, some stuff happened where some friends pulled away from me because they didn't like that I used drugs that were illegal. They didn't like that. And I was like, oh my God, they're so prissy. I judge them. But now I just sort of see, like, I was really oblivious that people are sort of all over the place in their values about these things. And definitely there is a variation in how people see the beginning of a relationship. What's an ideal way to do that? And I'm just going to tell you, you got attachment wounds, go slow. Slow is your friend. Slow lets you see the red flag before you know, buy it, bring it into the house, sleep with it. You see it and you have the opportunity to act on it. You also really need friends. You need women friends specifically who understand what you're doing, who are, you know, have similar values. You're supporting each other to kind of hold the line on what you actually want for yourself and to stop throwing away what you really wanted just so you can have that warm body next to you. I know loneliness is hard, but when you have friends and, you know, good friends, and when your life is structured to have fun and have people to hang out with, it's a lot easier to not have a date on Saturday night and not have to go crap fit with somebody who is not into you. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, so you found yourself on a date. He didn't think that's what it was. I hear that again and again. Like, if he's not asking you out on a date, if he's not saying it's a date, like, it's not a date. And so you had good perception there. And he hated confrontation. So what's interesting is you still thought about confronting him. And I just think, like, he's the one who was very consistent with what you guys agreed. You're the one whose expectations were actually different than what you agreed. And so part of you is kind of not seeing that, I think, because you're like, well, I didn't hate him, but why would you hate him? Like, he totally, you know, he was who he said he was, and I don't hear that he was mean or anything, but how could you help? How could you help but have your natural expectations of what you really want in a relationship? And that's what we do. We kind of distort it. We're not getting it. They say, look, you're not going to get it from me. And then we go, but you owe it to me. And that's kind of how sex affects the brain. And I know people out there will go, no, it doesn't, and polyamory and all that, but I'm not really talking to all those people. I'm talking to you, Maggie, and I'm talking to all the people who do want that committed relationship and just keep finding they have something much less. And time is ticking, and you're lonely, and you know, you want to get onto the part of your life where you have your person. You get to be together. It's great. You know, it's really nice to have that. It took me forever to get it, but I just, you know, I do find it really wonderful. So I wasn't wrong to want it. And I didn't get it until I really drew the line. I got very clear what I wanted, and I just completely cut out my involvement with men who were not that. If I wasn't interested, if I wasn't thinking they were a potential husband material, I just stopped being even friends with them, you know, because there was just a way that I would get mushy boundaries and yeah. And then, you know, when you're even friends, I'm not even talking about having sex, when you're just friends with people where one of you is attracted, it compromises your emotional availability. And healthy people detect that. So then, you know, you get people who are like, there's no good guys out there. It's like, there are tons of good guys, but your vibe is not drawing them to you. You know, the good people are looking for people who are pretty clear who they are and what they want. And they're not in situations that are demoralizing and horrible for them. So that's on us to clear up. We clear that up to become emotionally available. And we're not really available. We don't have something good to give until we can do that for ourselves. So it makes us untrustworthy too. The fact, you know, when you say, look, it's really got to be this way, and then, okay, I don't care. Even though like you're sort of compromising towards the middle and like it feels like people should think you're nice for that, people think it's untrustworthy. You know, you don't have boundaries. I don't think there's anything you could have done to make him interested in you, so don't worry that you did something wrong. You just got your experience trying to match what he wanted. And now you know this about yourself. So it's okay. It's okay. You call yourself a clown. You're not a clown. You're a woman. You're a woman, and attachment is tricky for you, and welcome to the club. It's okay. It all happened over a year, and it was like this very struggly year. You hung up on him, and then you didn't want to lose him for some reason. And you didn't want to lose him because you were attached. And there is some kind of friendship there, but it's the kind of friendship that's incompatible with what's actually happening. And it's very sad. And I think we've all had to do this. I've had to do this. I sometimes say, oh, it was like there's some metaphor of a coyote in a trap chewing off its arm to get out of the trap. For me to actually leave a friendship because it was toxic, and my feelings were so strong and they weren't reciprocated, it was I thought it would be so painful. But the funniest thing is, once you do it, and especially if you have really good people supporting you, who you respect, you just call them up and you're like, I did it. I told him, it's over. And then it's this relief comes over you, and your head comes up because you feel good about yourself again. Your integrity is just thank you. And everything's better again. And it's a huge leap forward. When you're in a relationship that can't work, you always think if this ends, I fell away. I fell out of Eden. I'm really lost and I'm not getting what I want. But you actually took a giant step forward towards the love you want. The first thing is to stop being entangled in a bad relationship. So good work. It's all messed up. You're out. And you do deserve better. And you deserve better from you. You deserve for you to honor what it is you really want. And if you're like most of us, you need to do a little work to clarify for yourself, is it what you want? My dating course, by the way, that's what we do. It's for clarification, to set yourself up to know, this is what I really want. This is unacceptable. This is who I won't date. And then you confront, since, you're like a go-get-em gal, you confront the reasons why it hasn't worked out in the past, and like you're doing now, which takes a lot of courage, but, it allows you to skip ahead and get to the part where things get good again. A lot of people, we know them, right, where they don't want to face what they're doing that's compromising them, that's holding them back. They don't want to face it, and guess what? They stay there. Don't be her, you go forward. All right, so this also I wanted to remind you, if you are in a relationship that has to be kept secret from your close friends, it's toxic. That's not good. It's not good for you. And I would like you to visualize how nice it's going to be when you are in a relationship that's mutual with somebody who's really interested in you too, and who is excited to introduce you to friends, and you can't wait to tell your friends, and your friends like that person, now you're in business. This is going really well. To do that for a year, I get that a coworker is difficult, but yeah, that's just more evidence that was not a good thing. Okay, I'm going to call you out on something here where you go, he's a wounded soul who lost his father at an early age. Okay, this is how we rationalize codependently that they're not really rejecting us. When they say they don't want a relationship, it's really just they're like a little boy who's sad, and then we have to mother them. Don't do that. Don't infantilize a man. Why would you want to be with somebody who's a little boy? By the way, he's not a little boy. That's a projection. Deep down, he's still a little child, you said, and it's evident in how he handles his emotions. And I think what you mean is, I don't know what you mean by that, but how he handles his emotions is not really your thing to pick apart, because he doesn't want a relationship. So, yeah, and there it is. He's not a little child. If you think a man is like a little child, don't date him. I can't recommend enough a grown-up for somebody to date. If what you want is to settle down, people who are childish, or immature, it won't work. It can't work. And this thing about he's a wounded soul who lost his father, forced him to grow up quickly and take on the burden of providing for his family. I get that you have empathy about that, but I can hear the rationalization of how could I leave him when all he wants is for this to be over? It's not logical. I'm just echoing back to you what you said. And you're right. I'm sure that he would be happy to sort of bounce in every once in a while when he's interested in sex, and then bounce out. But I know you don't want that. So I hope with you that you can keep a boundary on that. So you had said, you're worried you're going to say yes, and every time, even though you knew he was too flaky and messed up. So I didn't hear anything flaky and messed up. I actually heard him being completely consistent with what he promised, which was very little. And he was consistent with that. And I just would say, you knew maybe you thought he was flaky and messed up, but the key fact about him, the one that's the most important one for you to observe, is that he wasn't into you. I know it's painful, but it's so good when you can let this in, to just accept it, let it wash over you, cry, let your bones ache for it, feel lonely, feel worried about the future, and then get back up and keep going. If you're like me, breakups trigger a whole bunch of old stuff. And this is why my daily practice techniques are so valuable, to be able to have your adventures, to go ahead and try this casual relationship, have your hurt feelings, and have somewhere to get all that stuff that comes up for you about whatever it is, not being good enough, never being loved, being compared to your sister, having to be like, whatever your stuff is. It doesn't really matter. It's not, what that is it doesn't hold the solution for you. The solution is to get free. It's to get free of the idea that you're not good enough, that you better accept, the crumbs that you're getting. That's a bad idea, but it's there. And so when we're using the daily practice techniques, we're getting on paper and admitting and naming the fearful and resentful thoughts that come up every day. And when when a relationship ends, you're going to have a lot of stuff coming up. Fear I'm going to be alone, and I'm resentful because I fear, he blah, blah, blah. And it's going to come up, and you have this paper to put it on, and it starts moving downstream. It starts to release you from its grip of defining your whole life and your consciousness, of making your life unhappy because this person doesn't like you, who you knew that was coming. I know, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just calling it, because I think sometimes to just hear a second person just say what you said, it helps. It helps. I'm just saying what you told me. So I like your plan to stop having contact with him. That's always a good idea, especially if there's pain. And, who knows, maybe one day you can be around him again, but I wouldn't pursue it. There's no need. He's not really your friend. That's what I want you to hear about that. That's not really a friend. It's sometimes a thing that we make a construct of friendship to justify staying connected to somebody who's not interested in us. But that's not really friendship. Real friendship is somebody who is very open to you and, doesn't have walls up against you and isn't causing you great pain. Even though in this case, as I keep saying, I don't think it's him causing the pain. It's your sacrificing your own knowledge of what you need that is causing you pain. He just is, he's right where he said he was. So with that, I really wish you freedom from this idea that you have to settle for anything. I just know that good things can happen to you when you get clear that this is not what you want, and you get clear what you do want. Sometimes our childhood experiences make us way too good at overlooking our own needs and donating basically all our time and effort to the life of someone else who can't or won't return the favor. One kind of emotional unavailability, defined in the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, is a man who is what the author calls monogamous with his mother. And this is a deep kind of dysfunction that only the man himself could ever fix. But my letter today is from a woman who loves such a man. And she writes, "Hi, I am a 33-year-old and have been with my boyfriend for just over a year. I've started to feel exhausted, drained, and a little like an escape where I find myself suppressing my needs and my wants because his mom has cancer." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but I'm going to call this woman Senta, and let's see what's going on in her life right now. All right. I've been cheated on in the past by almost every serious relationship I've been in. I do have trust issues and have almost adopted a very independent character. I think this was built and added to my natural character, as when I look back at my childhood, in which I had a great childhood, but every experience does shape you, and I have an older sister with autism. Therefore, I've always had to protect and lead and just take a back seat, as she required a lot of my parents' attention, and I was pushed on by my parents to also look after her, which naturally forms my strong, independent, and fairly bossy character. To also add context about our relationship, he did cheat on me at the start of the relationship. 3 or 4 months in, with several girls and an escort. Even though I had several conversations with him about not going and dating other people, as at this point we were having sex, I like to be cautious due to previous ex-cheating partners giving me STIs, in which he reassured me several times. I found out the truth by going through his phone one evening. I guess this is due to my past and after having several horrible feelings that something wasn't right. We have kind of overcome that and have also been to 3 or 4 therapy sessions together, although communication is not our strongest point. That being said, my boyfriend is an only child. He moved over from his home country, just him and his mom, when he was 7. His mom has never been in a relationship since her divorce and was in abusive relationships with her ex-husband, my boyfriend's dad. She's also been diagnosed with cancer for the last 3 or 4 years. They have always had a very close relationship, but do bicker a lot due to differences in general, and the usual cultural differences are also visible to an outsider like myself. With his mom being very religious and visits church every 2 weeks, and him living and growing up very Western. I haven't known them outside of her having cancer, but I don't believe their relationship to be drastically different. He lives at home with her, drives her to every appointment, the hospital, the doctor, for scans, blood tests, etc. Every social event includes church every 2 weeks on Sunday, where he has to wait and he doesn't always want to go in, and every social event, that is, friends, parties, lunches, barbecues, majority of these being 2 hours away, where again, he has to stay with her. Our whole character is based around his mom's life, and I know I sound so selfish for this because she is ill. And I get why he'd want to be at these appointments, but I'm starting to feel drained as I can't even express how I feel or how frustrated I get. He missed one time to take her to church, as it had been off for a few weeks, so he didn't know it was back on. She managed to get an Uber there, but he said to me he'd never want her to do that again in case she feels ill and she wants to leave early. My frustration is that she's well enough to go. Surely she could go alone. She has a good quality of life and is out with her friends a lot. Yes, she has down days. She also messaged me the following week with what I'd say is a direct and passive-aggressive message which said, "Hi, stranger. Can I send you my dates and keep the partner's name on track, as he forgets, and then sometimes I forget to tell him, especially my church dates. Thank you." I don't know if I'm being overly sensitive because I live a busy life with 2 jobs and a house renovation while he doesn't work. He doesn't really work, doing a little on his phone. But the stranger comment was because I haven't been there a while, as I think he likes to come to my place for an escape, and just the lack of interest in anything other than demanding her dates and are never missed. Senta says, although I have acknowledged and researched that he seems just as dependent on her, again, I get with the cancer, which has been 3 years, and they've lived like this ever since. It's almost like he's scared to let her do anything alone. They still have that very mother-child relationship where he stays at home and plays computer games a lot while she'll cook dinner. He tends to do the food shop and runs her anywhere she wants to go, although I do feel this has been since childhood, as she told me a story about her 50th birthday before she had cancer. She planned the party, and she said she was annoyed with him because he wasn't ready waiting outside for her when she arrived. And there were people outside, which should have all been inside the hall, where I said, but it wasn't a surprise as you planned it, so why'd it matter if people were mingling outside? And she said, no, she told him they all needed to be in the hall, and he needed to walk her in. So he came out to do so, and then she was annoyed as she followed to say, then he just left me in the middle of the hall. And I said, where was he meant to take you? And she replied, he was meant to take me over to the DJ so I could do my speech. I just find it very bizarre and almost like she replaces her void from ex-husband with her son. Haha, bingo. I'm struggling to see the future, as he lives half the week here, half the week there, unless she has a lot on. It might just be 2 nights at my house, and I'm starting to beat myself up and getting emotional as I don't feel fulfilled, but I feel like a bitch, and that I'm being inconsiderate. How am I best to handle it? And I guess back to the main question, is it me or is the parent-child relationship normal to impact your relationship? And how to maneuver this, as I don't feel happy, and I think this plays a big part. Okay, Senta, I can help you with this. So I often will tell people, if I see a letter is like so much about another person, first of all, I know right away, like, we need to hear about you, what's going on in your life. And so you're saying you have 2 jobs, you're working on a home renovation, and you're in this relationship with somebody who acts like a kid who plays video games and hangs out with his mom all the time. And I don't think that would work for just about anybody, honestly. I think that when a parent has cancer, it's totally understandable that somebody would want to take care of them and fine, but they're probably not available for a relationship. So you've been seeing this guy for just over a year, and you feel exhausted and drained. And there you go, there's your information. If a relationship makes you feel exhausted and drained, this is not feeding you, it's just not working. You said, I have trust issues. You've always been cheated on, and this guy cheated on you with 3 women, several girls, and an escort. And you talked about it, and I don't know, this sounds like some serious denial about a terrible relationship. And you're trying to figure out, how are you to cope with the fact that he doesn't really hang out with you, and mainly he's basically monogamous with his mother. And so, yeah, as I said at the beginning, there's a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. Please don't go out and buy it because you're a woman, all right? Don't be codependent and try to read books for men. But for the men watching, this is a phenomenon that the author, whose name is Robert Glover, has articulated so well, that some men, they're not emotionally available and they cannot have good relationships because their primary relationship is with their mother. Now, I totally understand when family members need help, but if she's cooking and she's going to church and doing all these things, there's something else going on here. And he's just simply not available for a relationship. I could comment a lot on, that he doesn't work, he plays video games. I could say many things about this, but it doesn't really matter because he's not available to you. And I think you have an ideal of a relationship, as many adult women would, of somebody who is available to hang out and have their life organized with the relationship more at the center of it, if things go well. And this guy is just not that. It's not that. He not only isn't he doing it, it doesn't sound like he can. He's in a state of mind and a state of life that is just not going to work for you. So how you can cope with this is one of my more easy letters to answer. This is not a good relationship. You can cut and run, and I would really encourage you to do the work of defining what you need in a relationship. And one place you can do that is in my dating course, where the very first thing everybody does is define what it is that is your ideal relationship. What are the must-haves and what are the things you cannot tolerate? And I would just say one of them is there can't be another woman who's the center of his life. When people want a just sex relationship, they can hardly resist the lure of traumatized people who will pour out pure gold from their hearts and yet suffer in silence that their friend with benefits never returns that love. Neglect in childhood does that to people. It makes you feel ashamed that you want and need something more than a fling. It scares you into thinking that you better just settle for whatever you can get. And the terrible thing is, when you do that, you throw away years of your life longing and suffering and literally blocking any way that real love could ever find you. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Amaya, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I grew up in a troubled home. I'm the eldest of 3 siblings, and I'm the scapegoat for my self-righteous, narcissistic mother." All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's go through and see what's happening in Amaya's life right now. She says, her golden child is my sister, and my brother sort of sits on the fence, tipping over on each side, depending on whether he's been good or notorious. As for me, I have never felt close to my mother, and growing up, I had a very difficult time trying to connect with her and share things. The bond just did not blossom between us. Somehow I felt that she was on a different wavelength than I was, and we were very different people. She was and remains cold and distant. I have had periods of prolonged silent treatment given to me by her, each time making me remember events to analyze what I could have done so terribly wrong to piss her off this bad. I became exhausted of this hot and cold treatment and decided to go no contact. It's been a relief, though I feel guilty at times. My other parent, my father, was a loving man, full of life and loved food and soccer. We were like great buddies and we understood each other. We seemed to be battling the same demon, my mom. He had an unhappy marriage with her, but stayed in for me and siblings. He also had his fair share of troubles like nicotine addiction and extramarital affairs. I feel he was looking for solace amid his unloving and often unpredictable wife, who had no interest in keeping the marriage alive, but was rather like a parasite living off of him. Very sadly, my father passed away in 2017. As for my personal life, I've never had a normal, healthy, future-promising adult relationship. Somehow, I've been attracting all the wrong men in my life. You knew I was going to circle that, right? With an underline on attracting. Okay. The married, the unavailable, the available for relationship but doesn't believe in marriage, the cheater, Mr. Busy, the overprotective and controlling one, etc. Okay. My current dilemma goes back to 2019. I had been in the second year of a new job when I started chatting with this guy on Facebook, and he's a public figure in my country. The conversation flowed and we decided to meet. I agreed at first, but while waiting to pick him up after work, at this time I was doing noon shifts, I felt it was a terrible idea and wished he wouldn't turn up. But he did, and the meeting wasn't that bad. He started pursuing me thereafter and wanted to meet more often, but there was a deal breaker. He wanted to be friends with benefits. That put me off completely, as I wasn't into no strings attached relationships and wanted stability and reciprocated feelings. Despite my strong no, he would still ask me out. At the end of 8 months, I decided to meet him for coffee, followed by a movie night. He wasn't a bad or creepy person. He was very accommodating and generous. We laughed a lot and started liking each other's company. Soon I was visiting him at his place more often, and it didn't take long to have sex. I felt weird after our first time because I knew he didn't love me or want a relationship. I had somehow given in to his request to be his placeholder. This went on for about 2 years. Woo! And we would meet and cook together, have dinner, watch Netflix, and chill, and in my mind, I was getting all attached. I had fallen for him and wanted a life with him. I finally gathered all my courage one afternoon and confessed my feelings to him. He maintained his stand that he was just into it for the sex and the friendship we shared. I was heartbroken to know that his feelings had not shifted in 2 years. Days after this, he messaged to say his parents were arranging a marriage for him and he would have to abide by the wishes of his dying mother. I was further devastated. I just wanted to turn the clock back and have him all by myself, although he was never really mine. I had a big argument with him and poured my heart out that he had used me for his convenience. In his defense, he said he had been clear from the beginning and made me look like a fool for falling for him. Then the COVID lockdowns happened and we were all locked away, working from home. When things started to normalize, our equation also began to normalize. He again wanted to see me and have what we had. I was happy to have him back and thought the marriage thing was now a thing of the past. I did not talk about it, and neither did he. Well, there you go. We were back, and that's what mattered. A couple years ago, I was offered a scholarship to study abroad and told him about it. We were both happy about my study opportunity and celebrated over dinner. I thought that after my study would be the best time for us to finally settle down. Woo-oo, big leap there, okay. I left my country in June of that year, and to my shock, he got married in July. I was completely and utterly in ruins. I had so many questions and no answers. Where was this other girl all this while? Was this a calculated move? Was he desperately waiting for me to clear his way so he could marry her? Did my scholarship just help ease his desperation? I was so lost. I sought counseling via student services and managed to do well in my studies. Life in a new country had taken over, and I was slowly getting stronger and leaving my hurt behind. I think what helped most was the new environment, people, challenging units of study, and just the new vibe. Then life threw another curveball when I returned to my country. I got a job back in the same city where we were once lovebirds. I deliberately chose a flat on the opposite side of the city compared to his residential place to ensure I never see him in traffic. Though I've never seen him since I returned, I have this internal plunge, I'm not sure what that means, that my wound and hurt are opening and beginning to show in myself. I'm not sure what that means, but I think I know what it means. Yeah, the wound hurts. He has somehow been on my mind a lot recently. I find myself being limerent over him, hoping in hindsight that we'll meet and reignite our chemistry. My logical brain sees the dysfunction. It knows it's morally wrong to think this way of a married man. It knows I need to move on, turn my cab light on, and meet other available men. But my emotional side is just sort of frozen. It's not aligning with my logical brain. It seems to want that adventure of going back to the familiar sweet and sour partnership. I have so far been resilient and not giving in to my temptation to message or call him, and neither do I stalk him on social media. The hurt I received from seeing his wedding photos have seemingly barred me from looking at his accounts. I don't know how to align completely and stop this part of myself, which is hell-bent on appearing like a fool again. I want to meet someone I genuinely love, and he loves me too. I want a good future, and I want to kick his sick, betraying ass out of my life for good. I want to erase that soft spot I still hold for him. Is it my return to this familiar environment, which is playing games with my head and emotions? Please help. Okay, Amaya, I can help. I'm so sorry. This happens to the best of us sometimes, especially with a childhood like yours. And that's a lot that you lived through, and what's happening in your life now is so understandable in light of that, with the terrible way that your mother treated you, and then the being your dad's buddy, and how that would have primed you to have most of your emotional needs not met, but be the special buddy who makes it all work for some man. And I don't mean your dad did anything wrong. I can just see how it shaped your emotions so that you could do this again and just be so fond and loving and not ask too many questions from this guy. So let's go through what you told me. Narcissistic mother, some stuff about the siblings, sounds like horrible. And your dad stuck around for the sake of you, and you felt close to him, and then he died in 2017. So, interestingly, not too long after that, you find this guy. So you've never had a normal, healthy, future promising adult relationship. And here's where I'm gonna show you something that you said that I'm gonna really try to bring your attention to. You said, somehow I have been attracting all the wrong men in my life. Married, unavailable, available for relationship, but doesn't believe in marriage, the cheater, the Mr. Busy, the overprotective and controlling. Just pointing out your dad was unfaithful. Now, maybe he had his reasons, but you got trained as a kid to tolerate that, right? You must be an attractive person because people are interested in you. You're saying you attract these people, so they're attracted to you. But the only problem here is that you get together with people who are unavailable. And I want you to just make a little space to start opening up to the idea that, sure, they're attracted to you. Many people are attracted to you. But these ones who you're becoming attached to, it's because you attach to them. You are attracted to them. There's this weird way for somebody who was neglected as a kid that somebody who's unavailable just feels like home, you know? It just feels really right. It feels like the right person. And so that's what happens. We are attracted to them. That's the problem. Because if we would just, shut it down and be like, not available, no dice. I'm not going to talk to this guy. I'm not going to hope for him or spend time with him. So, but our minds try to dissociate from that idea that we are playing a role in that we're choosing it, we're connecting to it, we're acting on it by going, I don't know why, I'm just attracting these guys. Well, it's probably just because you're attractive. That's all. So lots of people will be attracted to you. What matters is who you choose, who you let into your heart and your bed, right? Yeah, this was 2 years after your dad died. And you had a new job. You had a lot going on. And you met this guy and you liked him. But you felt weird when you went to go pick him up after work. So it's, I don't know why. You didn't tell me much about this date, but why do I get a weird figure? He's a public figure. And you pick him up after work, and we know how the whole thing played out, that he was using you for a friends with benefit thing. And he just was totally straightforward about it. Yeah, I just want sex with you. We can be friends around that, but it's not anything that you can count on. I'm not having a relationship with you. I don't love you. That's where he was coming. And that So I'm just having this picture of you going to go pick him up. Now you keep saying you make a fool of yourself. You're not foolish. You're traumatized. You're you're this lovely woman. A woman is such a special thing. A woman's love is such a precious thing in this world. So you're not foolish that you give love. It's you're traumatized in that you give it to people who have told you flat out they're not going to give it back. And then you suffer and suffer. And your mind keeps trying to find ways that somehow you can make it change the nature of the relationship. And, we have movies like Pretty Woman or whatever, that show us like, see, true love will win. But it almost never would under those circumstances where a guy's like, no, this is just friends with benefits. What we don't want to be is the cool girl. And that's the word for a woman who is so accommodating of a guy who really doesn't give much back to her that she ends up sabotaging her own happiness and her own future. Don't be the cool girl. So, you're saying things like, I had a strong no. You had a weak no. Your no didn't mean no, so it wasn't a strong no. You tried for a while. And then you kind of picked up again. And that's the thing. It's this darn loneliness. Everything bad I've ever done, I've done because I was lonely. Lonely or overwhelmed, I guess. And loneliness is tough. The number one problem here is not having enough love and friendship in your life and having to call again some guy where you already know it just makes you feel full of pain and disrespected and not loved, right? Like, why would we go back to something like that? Because we're just so darn lonely that even something crappy feels better. I get it. It's not crazy. And it's not foolish either. Like, what are we? We're these wise beings who just go around, with all knowledge. No, we're like human beings who suffer and figure things out and talk to each other. So you're exactly in a perfectly understandable situation. You have not lost your dignity, and you're asking all the right questions about how you can get on course for what you actually want and deserve in your life. So that's all good. But I just noticed that when you say you attract these people and, but he just kept pursuing you, I think what you're missing a little bit here is how much power you actually have to make decisions about your life. And if you were to get very, very clear what you want, I think it would make it easier in those high pressure situations where you're so dang lonely and he's saying he wants to hang out and you guys could have dinner and watch a movie and it would be so much better than going home alone tonight. But when you really know what you want, you can make that hard choice to let that go by so that pretty soon you can have that dinner and a movie with somebody who's totally into you, who's really excited to be having dinner with you. That is possible for you. So in a weird way, when those of us with attachment wounds, put all of our energy, just pour it out for somebody who flat out isn't going to give it back, we're avoiding love. Maybe we're the avoidance. They're just doing what they do. They didn't even write a letter, so who can even say what their motivation is, But we can imagine. I know what your motivation is. You want to have a good partner, right? You want to just be safe and loved and have somebody who is into you and gets you and to enjoy life with. And that's a good thing to want. That's a beautiful part of you. So that's all. These people are getting in under the fence to, when they don't have that to give you. So you can change that. When you said you were angry at him, that it turns out he had an arranged marriage going and then the pandemic came and that didn't happen right away. And then suddenly he was married and didn't tell you. That is so awful. That's awful to have sex with somebody and not even tell them, oh, I'm getting married next month. I mean, it is awful. That's mistreatment of you. And isn't it funny how, being mistreated can awaken stronger love and you can't stop thinking about him. And now he's married and it's an issue that he's married and you shouldn't be pursuing a married man. That's an issue. But the thing I want you to really focus on is that part of you. And I think it was trained by your mom, the trauma bonding, blowing hot and cold, oh, I just adore you, and you're so great. Now go away. I'm getting married. That is hot and cold, even though you knew it was just friends with benefits. Hiding that from you and not allowing you to put that into your equation, which, would have given you the chance. Who even knows if you would have left, right? I know how compelling it is sometimes. So if you're not careful, though, I would not be surprised if he's somebody who would be happy to have an affair with you and many others. It feels like that because of the dishonesty in not telling you that a wedding was about to happen. So that, he'd be happy to do that. I don't want you to be the person who throws away her whole, special time in life to be loved and to love somebody else on somebody who's just taking, like a vampire, right? A romantic shoplifter, I call them. They just take from you and, like it's theirs. And because we're traumatized, we have a hard time defending against it. But that's why we get together. That's why you wrote this letter. You have all of us. And, if you ever want to come into the Crappy Childhood Fairy membership, we have like a whole bunch of people who support each other and sticking to what they actually want in life, even when they're feeling alone in the world. It helps so much to have friends on the journey with you, because then you're not alone and you have people you can talk to and say, I feel like calling him, and people can go, call me instead. Here, call me. How you doing? Tell me about your day. It helps so much to have people like that. I think that these draining these vampire-like relationships, it's very hard for them to happen in the life of somebody who is loved and connected to other people. So it seems like the solution is all about how you handle him, but the solution is really about how you handle your joy and your friendships in your life. And so that you have more of that and you have fun things to go to. Limerence crops up when life is bleak, right? It's like a desperate measure to get something exciting in your life, even when there's nothing exciting in your life. So when life is bleak, it will turn to limerence. That's happening now. I can tell you need fun and you need friends. You need people who care about you, and it will take the pressure off. I would definitely suggest, just make a rule with yourself. You're not going to contact that man ever again. And if you're thinking about it, if you want to date differently in the future, I really recommend that you start by writing down what you do want and getting clear and owning it and standing up for it. And that's how my whole dating course goes. That's in part of the membership. If you're a member, you can take that, or there's links to everything down in the description section below if you want to check that out. So feelings are going to come up. Getting over a relationship where there's a strong attachment, even when it's miserable, can be like a withdrawal from a strong drug, but it passes. It passes. And just like with drugs, cold turkey, that's the way. So you were asking, how can I let this go and get over it? I would say, you've written this letter. You've had it read on YouTube for you. Let this be the last time you talk about it for a long time. There's no need to talk about it anymore. It doesn't define you. It's no longer important to your story. And the more you talk about it, the more you activate like old associations and longings and things. And sometimes, I've had to get over a lot of things in my life. Sometimes relationships, sometimes nicotine. And let's just talk about nicotine as an analogy to this kind of withdrawal. I had to stop thinking about cigarettes. At first I would just think about them all the time and go, oh, that would be so good right now. And I realized it was going to be hard for me to get through that if I was going to just sit and romanticize the cigarettes and how good that would feel and how hard this is. And I just was like, every time I caught myself thinking about cigarettes, I go like, not that thought, just not that thought. And I would focus on something positive and sweet. It could be anything like flowers, puppies, the sky, art, just something that's easy for you to think about that makes you think nice thoughts. And I'm not saying all life has to be la perfect, but you just need a happy thought to go to. And some people do it with like an affirmation. Some people do it with a rubber band snapping on their wrist. That's never worked for me. And I don't know. It's not going to hurt anybody if it works for you, but just something to discourage yourself from indulging in that thought. And don't talk about them. It's people like to women like to get together and talk about, I know this guy. And of course, I've encountered a lot of limerent people in my life and in my work. And what I know, and sometimes even in the way they write letters to me, you didn't do this, but it's like another opportunity to try to get somebody to listen to the whole story of this amazing romance. And it's not good to go into that story or relive it or try to recruit other people to care about it. It's over. It's gone. It's out of your life now. So not talking about it and not thinking about it, I think, are very underrated ways to get something out of your mind. And then if a lot of emotions come up, and if you having a rough past, having kind of addictive type thinking about a relationship that actually wasn't good, but you're sort of getting dopamine out of it, it's very good to have a way to process your stressed out thoughts and feelings. And that is why I'm always talking about the daily practice. The way you were taught that the right way to find your future spouse is dooming your chances from the start. You were told that what healthy people do is just see who you meet. If you like someone and they like you, start hanging out. And if there's mutual attraction, then the next level would be to start having sex. But for as long as possible, you must avoid any talk of defining the relationship, because in our culture, trying to get clarification about someone's level of interest, what their intentions are for the relationship, it's seen as outdated, controlling, and clingy. You know if you bring it up, and I'm talking to women here, you might get dumped. So if you're into this person that you've been sleeping with, you go along feeling one way, in love, hopeful, terrified of rejection, but acting another way. It's cool. I'm the cool girl. Whatever. See you when I see you. And then hope to God they decide they're into you. And this whole fragmented courtship idea seems to work for other people, but if you have attachment wounds from growing up with neglectful parents, if you were never loved properly, then playing this cool girl game would be like this terrible prison you put yourself into. You think the other person is requiring it, but actually you did this to yourself when the whole thing started. And all your emotional energy is pouring into a relationship that may have been doomed before it even began. Okay? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Bridget, and she writes, "Dear Fairy, I'm a product of an unstable home. Both of my parents came from volatile, violent, and abusing families, and this impacted them." Okay, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things that I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's read through Bridget's letter all the way through and see what's going on. All right. She says, "My father is an alcoholic and a narcissist, and my mother was depressive and codependent. I grew up with a lot of instability, aggression, and pain. Despite this, I managed to forge a life for myself that I can be proud of. Of course, everything is far from perfect, and I still have a lot to achieve, but at 33, I managed to have a career as a freelancer in a very niche market that brings me a lot of joy and fulfillment, and I moved to another continent where I'm building a stable and secure life. However, in my love life, it seems all the dysfunctionality keeps resurfacing." I know how that is. "And it's horrifying to me that I can't seem to undo old patterns and find love. I've been through a myriad of horrible relationships, abuse, and heartache, and this has only added to my abandonment issues. My last relationship, which is the one that has me writing to you today, was in a lot of ways very different than previous ones. I met this man who was always very kind to me, and we initiated a courtship that was very casual at first. However, with time, I started developing deeper feelings for him, and it came to a point where I had to confront him about where the relationship was going. And this resulted in us breaking up because he had recently left another long-term relationship and was not ready for commitment just yet. He was honest and respectful during the breakup, but it still left me devastated. At the time when I confronted him, I truly believed when I told him if he couldn't give me what I need, that he needed to set me free so I could find someone who would meet my needs. I'm also well aware that even though we got along greatly and he has a lot of good qualities, there are a lot of things that make us a less than perfect match. We don't share a lot of the same values, and we don't have the same vision for our lives. For example, he really wants kids, while I'm sure that I don't want to become a mother. So all of this should be enough for me to know that this was a relationship that had great things but didn't work out, and I should move on from it. But this is not what happened. I'm still stuck in this pain, and I can't let go of the feelings of rejection and abandonment. I've been in a downward spiral ever since our breakup and fallen into old self-destructive behaviors. It's awful because it feels like I've learned nothing, that I haven't healed one bit, and I'm always going to be stuck in this cycle every time I fall for someone. It also doesn't help that friends don't seem to understand why this situation has hurt me so much, which has made me feel even more isolated and alone. I would really like your help in this situation. How can I separate the rejection of today from the rejection of the past and find confidence that I have made the right decision in confronting him and not getting swallowed by the despair of being alone again once again? Your guidance would be much appreciated. From Bridget. Okay, Bridget, I got you. Let's go through again. I'm going to come back to things I circled and talk about what you told me about this situation. All right. I noticed you used the word unstable 3 times. Unstable. That's interesting. Like, that's not an uncommon feature for a traumatic home for a kid, but just that you used it 3 times. I just feel like stability is something you really need, and you're very aware that you haven't had it. And so both your parents came from these terrible childhoods, and your father is an alcoholic and a narcissist. Your mother was depressive and codependent. It sounds like maybe she's passed away. And you grew up with a lot of instability, aggression, and pain. That's horrible. Bridget, that's horrible. That's not right. That would create problems in relationships for anyone. But you managed to forge a life for yourself. Yay! And you're proud of it. And you're 33. You have a career as a freelancer in a very niche market, and you have a lot of joy. And you move to another continent where you're building a stable and secure life. There's that word stability again. So good. You've got a stable life and you're secure. Interesting that you moved a whole continent away from your family. And I am proud of you too. 33, like, to have that level of self-development going on, that's fantastic. And it's so normal for us to have a really developed part of ourselves and then a struggling part of ourselves, right? That's really normal. And for it to show up in relationships, I just totally get it. I totally get it. And I think that of course it has a lot to do with the way you were raised. But what can you do now? What you can do now is what you're doing. You're sort of opening up you're lifting the veil on what the heck's happening here. Why am I having this pattern? So terrible relationship patterns, the gift of them is that when they're a pattern and you're old enough to know that, to kind of see, shoot, the same thing keeps happening over and over again. When it just happens one time, you're like, oh, that guy's a jerk. I'll do better next time. It happens twice and you think, oh, I'm just unlucky. 3rd time, you start going, uh-oh, okay, something's up with me, and I can't see it coming, and it keeps happening. And that is a devastating and frightening realization. There's a powerlessness to that, like, I don't even know how this happened. And I hear you. I believe you you didn't know how this happened. So I'm going to try to see if I can hear in your language here where I see it happening, where I see this sort of little blank outs. I was going to say self-deception, but I don't think it's that active. I think it's just like there's this little like unconsciousness flips in and goes, oh, can't see it. And that's what we do. And you can stop doing that. And we do it by talking about it and talking about it frankly. You feel horrified. You have abandonment issues. Abandonment's such a drag because, you get an attachment issue and it makes you get into a relationship really fast. And you don't ask all the questions you need to ask, which is where I'm going to go with this letter, I'll tell you. But abandonment then makes it so you can't leave even when you already know it's bad. You can't stop loving them even though you know that it's going nowhere. So yeah, that's what happens. And as I understand it, there's a huge brain component. Like, we know that trauma in childhood creates dysregulation. We don't even know the half of it, though, about like everything that goes on. There are changes that go on in the way that we respond. The way that anybody responds to, that like feeling of falling in love or becoming attracted to somebody, like, it is so primal. Like, nobody has dials on it of how to control that. Nobody does. But you throw trauma in the mix and you're basically, you're like this tender soul at the mercy of all this stuff going on in your wiring that's causing you to attach prematurely and to commit without reason. That's basically what's going on. And I think sometimes knowing, there's a name for what you have. It's complex PTSD. There's a name for what's happening to you, and it's attachment disorders. I don't like the word disorder, but you know what I mean. I can't even diagnose you with CPTSD, but let's just call it childhood PTSD. You have trauma from childhood. It's affecting your relationships. Anybody who thinks they have that, by the way, I have a quiz where you can check against 12 really common symptoms that's happening for you, and it's down in the description section if you want to check that out. It's on the free tools page of my website. That's always linked down there. You can go right to the website, Crappy Childhood Fairy, and go to the free tools page or look at all the other stuff going on. You said, I met this man who was always kind to me and we initiated a courtship that was very casual at first. So I just want to tell you the word courtship has a special meaning, and it's getting to know somebody with an eye toward marriage. And you told me, as you gave me the details on this, there was never an eye towards marriage. It was very clear from some key facts, like being on a different page about whether or not to have kids, like right there, this relationship is doomed. That level of disagreement is too big a thing. You just can't date people like that if what you want is stable, loving relationship with somebody whose values and whose life goals match yours. So here's the harsh thing, and this will scare you as a person with attachment wounds and abandonment wounds, but don't be scared. Take it from me. It sounds scary, but it's the fastest route to that loving, stable relationship you want. But you need to draw the line. You need to get very clear on who could possibly be that right person for you and identify the characteristics of someone who is and someone who is not. There's a line there, and you do not date people below that line. If they don't match things that are important to you, like have to be available for a committed relationship, a marriage even, do not want kids because that's not what you want, really, really loves you and gets you because you're you, and that is the most wonderful thing. That's the person they want to be with. As people have often said in our comments, if a guy likes you, if he loves you, you will not be in doubt about it. You're not going to be in doubt about it. So I'm proud of you that this came to question. But here's what happened is you were already involved with him for quite a while before the conversation came up. And you started developing deeper feelings for him. So you said it was casual. You had a casual courtship with him, but then you developed deeper feelings. I assume it was a sexual relationship. And then it came to a point where you had to confront him. That's kind of a rough word, about where the relationship was going. So I want to put a different model in front of you, where as you're getting to know somebody, you're maybe, no more than the third date. And the first date is coffee, and the second date is coffee and a little, muffin. And the third date might be a lunch, right? You don't want to go too fast. When you've got these wounds, you go very slow. This is what I call structured dating. I teach it in my dating course. You can find that one down below too. Very slow allows you to keep processing what's happening and get real with it, and to have supportive friends who you can check out what you're experiencing with and keep getting a reality check so that you don't slip into that unconscious state that is so common for us when stuff gets stressful. And what's stressful is dating somebody and thinking maybe they're not on the same page. So guess what? You get to find out before you get all into somebody. Now, it's possible to be very disappointed after 3 dates that have, gotten as far as lunch with somebody. I know that can be hurtful. But if you haven't slept with somebody, you have so much more space to think and decide and exit without a lot of pain and activation of your wounds. And that's a good thing. So I really suggest going slowly for somebody with your wounds. You go very slowly. And honestly, people who are serious or good potential partners for you, they will love that about you. It communicates that you're high value. If you've seen that on videos online, I don't really like that. Some people are not low value, but just very desirable is the point. It's very desirable when somebody is not rushing in, is not just ready to open up their entire life to somebody else. That's a red flag for a healthy person. So sometimes we have to act as if. We act as if we don't have these wounds operating, and we just follow the roadmap of somebody who is not wounded like that. We follow the roadmap so that we can get results that are similar. And the thing is, when your trauma is most vulnerable is in the early part. Well, I'm not going to say that. There are other things that come up, like childbirth, which is not going to be your choice. And also getting married, or when there's a threat to the relationship, somebody cheats or something, that can all activate old stuff, a hospitalization. But one really big, rocky, bumpy time is getting into the relationship, because all that magical thinking is kicking up with all the neurological activity of falling in love. And it's, driving a big narrative, and a whole bunch of emotional needs are coming up. And if your emotional needs are still just kind of loose ropes hanging off something, because they never got met, they're going to go, oh, blah, 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 and then wrap around somebody who comes into sight who seems good to you, right? And that can really freak people out. I know. It freaks them out if you are just too into them at first. It doesn't feel right. It feels a bit off to people. And a red flag appears, and people who have a little bit of health around that are just oh, I see a red flag. You shouldn't be into it that fast. So slowing down is attractive. Slowing down is wise. And So then you have a chance to know it's not courtship until that is the expressed intention. So people sort of get to know each other. You can get to know people casually. But I don't encourage casual sex. Like, sex is really never casual for somebody with an attachment wound. And it's going to immediately produce, strong feelings and needs around that may not fit the situation. And when you don't know somebody, you're very likely to get hurt. So you can have that differently, even though you're just going to always be living as somebody who had a childhood like you had. When you've had time to get to know somebody and that relationship has formed into something truly loving and committed, then when sex finally happens, it's like, even if you kind of freak out and cry or, feel like you need to run away, there's going to be a way to talk about it. There's going to be a way to understand. The whole relationship isn't going to end. You would have had a lot of understanding for each other about what might come up, because little versions of it would come up. Like, that's what stable is. That's what stable is. So stability requires slowness. And we're just, we're living in a time where it just seems like it ought to work, that you could rush in, and there's this idea, and there's always commenters. They're like, there's nothing wrong with casual sex. And I'm not really commenting on what everybody wants to do. I'm talking to people with attachment wounds who are writing to me and saying, like, I'm getting my heart broken and I can't see why. And that's what I see. And I pick letters of people I relate to, and I have something to say based on my own experience. Like, sometimes people write and I'm just like, oh gosh, I don't know. I've never had that, or I haven't succeeded at solving that one yet. But this one I have. And that's how I did it. So I thought it was interesting that when you talked to him and wanted to know where it was going, you had to break up because it's weird the way you said it. This resulted in us breaking up because he had recently left another long-term relationship and was not ready for commitment. He was honest and respectful. Okay, but I just think, like, if he was seeing you all this time and presumably having sex and he wasn't ready for commitment, I don't think it was that honest and respectful. I don't think that any person should ever assume that they can just have sex with somebody when they're not available for the whole relationship. Like, I realize, like, two people will totally consent to not talk about that. But why? And it's usually because one of them doesn't want to deal with it because they know it will be a deal breaker, and the other one doesn't want to bring it up because they know it's going to be a deal breaker, and everybody just wants it to kind of hang together. But on some level, that fear you're having, that anxiety you're having, it's because you know. So, all right, I'm going to say this is the hardest thing I'm going to tell you, all right? But when somebody says, oh yeah, I've been seeing you all this time, but actually I don't want a commitment just yet because I just left another long-term relationship. See, people are kind. They try to be kind and they try to make it about that. But what it is that some of us will have a relationship with somebody we really just are not that into. And it's been my experience that most men, they're very capable of that. Like, it's funny because my husband and I were talking about a situation like this last night over dinner, and my 19-year-old son, and we were talking about it. And I think it was something that had come up in the comments in YouTube. And, my whole family works on Crappy Childhood Fairy, so we see things, and we were talking about it. And my husband said, oh, I wonder, somebody said, well, how could somebody act so nice and then leave me? And this comes up a lot, right? You'll see it in the letters a lot. And then leave me and not care. And my husband said, I wonder why. And I was like, what do you mean? Still, I was like, how could it be? And he's like, well, he just said basically, like, if women are just offering sex and they're not going to ask any questions or require anything, there's a lot of guys who will be like, okay, all right. Emotionally, they seem a little better equipped to handle that. And so it can work for them. I wouldn't say everybody. I think sometimes men get their heart quite broken by this kind of thing working the other way. So it's not 100%, but you're writing to me, and I think you're having a man-woman dynamic here where, he's just happy to have companionship and sex and yeah, but then he's like, oh yeah, no, I just got out of a heavy relationship. So, you didn't know you were in a doomed relationship. Doomed. I mean, doomed because it can't lead to commitment, and that's what you want. So that is a doomed relationship. Had you had this conversation before you even had, lunch with him, you would have had your answer about him and you could have saved so much heartache. And this is what I'm going to suggest to you, is that you get very clear about what you need and prepared to speak up for it and walk away when that's not what it is. That's really all there is to it. It's easier said than done, I know, because what your mind and your attachment wounds are saying, it's like, I better say, I better accept this because it's all I'm ever going to get. And, it took me 4 months before I even met anybody I liked. And what if nobody comes along? They will come along, and they will come along and you'll be emotionally available. You'll be emotionally available because you're not all strung out on somebody who's not into you. And so whether it's after a relationship has ended this way or it's still going on, I just really, for people who want real love, the sooner you can get out of this half-baked BS, the better. Every time you get out of a half-baked relationship, you've just taken a giant step toward true love, even though the thing in front of you that you see is that you're alone on Saturday night. Alone on Saturday night is pregnant with possibility. So it's what you need now is friends. I always recommend to people, learn my daily practice techniques. They're free. You can learn them down below. They're on that free tools page of my website. You can learn and try these in less than an hour, and they help to cope with the emotions that come up. Because when you have gotten kind of hooked on somebody and you're having trouble letting it go, it's a lot of emotion, right? It's fear it's not going to be okay. It's resentment at yourself that you screwed up somehow. And so you might know intellectually that you didn't, you did your best, you're good, but it's coming up and it needs to go somewhere. And you can get it out of your head where it's going to spin around if you have CPTSD, out and on paper, get a break from it, and start to have renewed and refreshed thinking and emotional states. New, better, truer, real, present time, right? So that you can make great choices in your life and start to have fun. And you need fun and joy. Without fun and joy, some crappy relationship starts to look like the best offer there is. No. If you're having a bunch of fun with your friends, you're just like, meh, this guy, meh, who needs it? So I'm glad he, was kind and all that. I just really appreciate that you told him, like, if he couldn't give you what you want, commitment, he needed to set you free. So I just thought what was interesting is your passive language, that he sets you free, that he just sits there and like holds you on some sort of, leash or something, and he has to set you free. But, he doesn't have you on a leash. He's just hanging out. He's just being him. He sounds like the sort of person who was capable of being honest about where he's coming from had you asked earlier. So there were good qualities, but it was different. And I would just pat yourself on the back that you dated somebody with good qualities. You got clearer about how much you need to know these certain things in advance. Like, is there a potential for a future? At a certain point in life, I don't know, you're 33, right? You probably had some painful things before, right? You said you have. So if you want to stop having that, you can just start like really owning what you want. You don't have to hide it. You don't have to pretend like, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to get all these expectations on you or anything. No, have expectations. Your life is precious. The love and partnership that you have to give is like gold and diamonds. And somebody would be so happy if you would share that with them. So don't waste it. Don't waste it. You just got to kind of start to be a little bit more systematic about this. You're not it? Okay, whoosh. And no staying friends. If you have these attachment wounds, staying friends, it just keeps you kind of enmeshed with people. And it drains away the emotional energy, the emotional availability that healthy people can sense. Your light does not come on when you're all kind of, connected and friends with all these people that you kind of have feelings for. And it's not really great for their potential partners too. For some woman he's going to end up with to be all like, why are we hanging out with your ex? So, we start to act like your great grandparents here, just starting to be like, we date, it didn't work out, it's over, we move on. That's how people used to do it. Okay. There's wisdom in some of that. Not everything they did was brilliant, but that part I think is really good. And they had trauma too, right? They had trauma too. You've been in a downward spiral. I hope this encourages you. Just knowing like you're normal, your abandonment wounds are up. There's this thing called abandonment melange. I want to make sure you know about it. That when a relationship ends, even when you know it wasn't great, even when you set the boundary that made the whole thing like not work anymore, good job. But then your abandonment melange kicked in. That's all. And I would suggest to you reading the book by Pete Walker, CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. He defined that feeling. I've never heard it spoken of till I read his book, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that feeling. Even when I was like 15, I called it the terrible feeling. I knew the feeling, but it was when something ended or somebody rejected me, this feeling of this, it's these three terrible peak level relationships of panic, rage, and grief. And they come together to feel like the world has come to an end, like you have been kicked out of Eden. It's a terrible feeling. And you can reduce that by 50% right away by knowing there's a word for it and it's a thing. It's not actually what's happening. Your feelings are not in response to what's happening. It's just a phenomenon that happens to people who were abandoned as kids. And so the first step toward healing it is naming it, recognizing it when it's happening, and then having your paper and pen to go to get those feelings out, and then having supportive friends who know what abandonment melange is. And that is something, in Crappy Childhood Fairy World, a lot of people know what that is. We talk about it a lot. You can talk to people here in the comments. If you want to go deeper, I have my membership program. People talk on our secret Facebook group. They do the daily practice together on Zoom. So there's so many ways that you can connect with people and get that support, so that when you're taking a nosedive down emotionally, it's like, I don't know, I should call them. I just think, what's wrong with me, right? You connect with your friend and she says, nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you, Bridget. You're good. You're really good. You're just having abandonment melange. I know, it's hard. And when you have somebody who can mirror that for you, you never have to go down to that terrible level of feeling again. It never has to be so bad as it was before. It gets better. It gets better, and the more days that you spend feeling better, being more regulated, making better choices, it adds up pretty fast to a very happy life. And if love is what you're seeking, it's bound to find you when you're in that good state, all right?